Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. Appreciate everybody for tuning in to the Utah Blockcast. Appreciate everybody that hopped on the live stream Thursday night with us and talked through some things. Appreciate Drew for joining us as a special guest, and appreciate Bennett for obviously co-hosting with me as well. Go to YouTube, go to your podcast feeds, download, subscribe, hit the like button, hit those 5-star ratings. We appreciate it. Definitely helps us out. And obviously we've got a great community of people that have long listened to the Blockcast, and I appreciate everybody that has been along for the journey. And it's been great to see the podcast continuing to grow and expand and all that sort of stuff. So really appreciate everybody that supports. So on today's episode, last night, again, we did our live stream, Bennett and I, with Drew as well, and talked a little bit about the game. On today's episode, I welcomed on Tyler King of the Denver Gazette to talk a little bit more about Colorado specifically, and sort of the vibe around the Buffs program and Coach Prime and all sorts of things. So it was really great to have Tyler on. He's been following Colorado sports for a little while now and has done a good job at the Gazette, and also does quite a bit of basketball coverage as well. So we did a little bit of crossover podcast recording between us this week, and he provided some insights on this episode that I think will be helpful and beneficial, and kind of understanding what this Colorado Buffs team is all about, right? So this is a team that's 3-4, and yet you look at the game logs and you look at the score differences, and Colorado has been competitive, and obviously losing players like Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, and you're going to see a drop off. But I think this Colorado team has embraced greater balance and more complementary football between offense and defense. And I think that's allowed them to be a little bit more competitive. And they finally broke through before the bye week with a win over Iowa State, which was one that I think caught a lot of people by surprise. And also it's sort of just indicative of Colorado and the buy-in that Coach Prime has there with his guys. So this is going to be a tough matchup. Obviously, Colorado coming off of the bye week, a week to rest and a week to prepare for Utah, coming off of the Holy War game as well. And this is going to be a really important one and a pivotal one in the Big 12 race. So it's going to be important for Utah to kind of rally the troops and figure some things out with that quarterback position, and obviously Devin Dampier and his health. All indications early on in the week were that Bird Ficklin was going to be the guy, but there was just that little tidbit here and there that Devin Dampier has been pretty adamant about playing in this game, and so we'll see what happens with that quarterback decision tomorrow night. But I think there's a chance Dampier plays, but I think expectation going into that game is going to be Ficklin. So we'll see. I don't know for sure just yet. We'll see. But along those same lines with the injury report, I know that there's been a lot of confusion around the injury report this week because, there were a number of guys that have been listed as out for the previous weeks with what we know as season-ending injuries. Well, most of them outside of Nate Ritchie, but now it seems that all of those are, in fact, season-ending injuries because they've now been removed from the availability report. And according to Big 12 rules, if a player is deemed to have a season-ending injury, they are reported to the Big 12 conference as such. They are reported on availability reports for at least one game, and then they can be removed from the availability report at that point on. So I think we take all of this to mean that the players that were listed as out the previous couple of weeks, guys like Nate Ritchie, Dadrian Zipper, Isaiah Garcia, Paul Fitzgerald, those are all guys that have suffered season-ending injuries. And I think obviously everybody's going to look at Nate Ritchie as a guy that, Whittingham previously mentioned as someone that did not actually suffer a season-ending injury. But I think I think that was more about, and you can go back, you can listen to the episodes, you can watch the YouTube episode. I think we all kind of assumed that this meant it was still a long-term injury, but just there was that chance maybe that he gets back in December, maybe gets back in January. But I think it's safe to assume that all of those guys that have previously been mentioned as or listed as out on the availability reports and we're pretty consistent there that they are just done for the year. So we'll follow up on that specifically with Coach Whittingham when we get the opportunity to, but I think that is the safe assumption to make there. So without much more from me, let's get into my conversation with Tyler King and his insights on the Colorado Buffs. All right, Tyler King of the Denver Gazette joining me now. Tyler, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Steve. How are you?
Doing well. Looking forward to this one. Colorado, Utah, Saturday night. Should be a fun one. Obviously, Colorado coming into this 3-4, Utah 5-2. But I think this is a really important game. So I'm glad that you're taking some time to hop on with me and just kind of break down this matchup between Utah and Colorado. It should be a fun one.
Yeah, definitely will be. I'm bummed I'm not going to be out there for the game. I love Salt Lake City. I was out there for the first time a couple years ago when the Buffs played. Last time the Buffs played at Utah. Always fun matchup between these two teams. Even though they tried to make it a rivalry in the Pac-12, but now Utah's got their real rival in the Big 12 with BYU, as we saw last week. But should be a fun matchup this week. I'm looking forward to it.
Nah, the Rumble and the Rockies is the only rivalry game that matters this week for Utah. So we don't talk about the other one this week. No, this is a fun one, and I think again, I don't think the 3-4 record is indicative of how competitive Colorado has been this season. So I'm glad that you'll be able to provide some context on the Buffs going into this matchup. So obviously, Colorado coming off a bye, went into the bye week coming off a big win over Iowa State. Just what do you feel like? Where do you feel like this team is at? Midway through the season and getting into that bye week.
I think they're at a good spot. I think it could have really went the wrong way if they had lost to Iowa State. They kind of needed that win. It's a signature win of this season and one of the signature wins of the Coach Prime era. To be frank, like
Yeah.
they've beaten up on the teams they needed to, especially last year. Year one under Coach Prime was rough. In 2023, that first year in the Pac-12. After that crazy first month, it really went all downhill. But they kind of needed it. I mean, some of the players talked about after that game against Iowa State that, the coaching staff told them, like, look, man, you guys are going to be 3-4 or 2-5 after this game. And one of those feels a lot worse than the other, even though it's, one game apart. Things could have really went south for this group in a bye week, after another loss. But they were able to pull it out. I think it was encouraging to see them finally close out a game. That's something they've talked about for weeks now. 3 of their 4 losses have come in games where they've led by 10 plus points. 2 of them they led by 2 touchdowns. That BYU game at the end of last month was a game they really felt like they threw away. So they really could be 4-3 or even 5-2. Like they could have a much better record if 2 of those 3 games go their way and they're able to hold on in the second half. So I think you got to be encouraged by that if you're a Buffs fan, seeing what you saw from Caden Salter in the second half of that game offensively. So I think, obviously they're 2 touchdown underdog going into this week against Utah, but I feel like the Buffs have to feel pretty good that they can keep this competitive and maybe continue the streak of getting over the hump in late in these games.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised to see that margin and that spread, and I think it was interesting. I just did a radio interview before hopping on with you here, and I used the term that Colorado's better, which I corrected myself because it's hard to go from a Heisman winner and a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders. Now you're 3-4, and I think what I explained was there's greater balance between offensive and defensive side of the balls, as well as the throwing game and the running game, and I think that's made Colorado a bit more competitive this year, where the results haven't come, but I think overall this Colorado team is really competitive and can win games in different ways than they could last year. So do you feel like how do you feel like Colorado has sort of moved on from the Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, season last year? And how do you feel like this team, what sort of identity do you feel like this team has embraced this season?
they're certainly deeper than they were during the first 2 years under Coach Prime. Obviously, you're lacking the star power, like you said. Like
Right.
you can't replace a Shedeur Sanders or a Travis Hunter. I think Utah fans are well aware of what Travis Hunter did, last year in
Yeah.
that game in Boulder. That was kind of like the stamp on his Heisman. I remember writing after that game, like he kind of sealed the Heisman with that game. And they just don't have that this year. Like Caden Salter's been up and down at quarterback. But I think they found an identity with the running game. The offensive line has majorly improved.
Yeah.
Jordan Seaton has taken a step forward as a sophomore. He was by far their best offensive lineman as a true freshman last year, but now he's got guys alongside him that are playing close to his level as well. They brought in a bunch of veteran transfers that have all had a positive impact up front. So, with Salter, he's a dual threat quarterback, as people remember from his days at Liberty. You won a lot of games there for that program. They've started to find, they've gotten good production from the running backs. They've got 4 of them that have played at varying times throughout this year. I think they'll get 2 of them have been hurt, but I think they'll get 1 of them back this week, DeKalen Taylor. But Michael Welch has been good. Dallin Hayden has come on the last couple weeks, former Ohio State transfer. And like I said, Salter's got his abilities to run the ball as well and scramble and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of the identity. And then in the passing game, they're just trying to look for big plays because they've got guys on the outside that I think are guys that can go up and win jump balls downfield, like Amarion Miller, Joseph Williams, who's new to the program this year. Both those guys have come on strong in the last couple weeks, had big games against Iowa State. So those are the guys to watch for offensively. And then defensively, it's kind of been a bend don't break kind of thing with this Buffs defense. Like you watch, and it doesn't matter who it is. Like everybody's kind of able to move the ball on them, but they've been opportunistic. They finally got some turnovers against Iowa State. They got a turnover, that interception at the goal line, in a big play in that game. But they've been able to get some stops and limit teams to field goals. That's kind of their identity, because they've been injured and they've got a bunch of new starters on that side of the ball. But if there's one guy to watch for, it's probably Tawfiq Bayer, the safety who leads the team in tackles. He had that interception at the goal line against Iowa State, and he's a guy who likes to come downhill, make plays in the run game too. So they've still got playmakers on both sides of the ball, but just not the star talent that people are used to seeing with this Buffs team from the last couple of years.
Be curious to get your thoughts on Coach Prime and sort of how he views Kyle Whittingham. I know, so Kyle Whittingham has shared a lot of really positive things about Coach Prime in previous months and going back to last year and the year before that, with Coach Prime taking over there. He's heaped a lot of praise towards Coach Prime and what he's doing there. This week, we didn't get as much of that. I think a lot of that had to do with coming off of the BYU rivalry game and sort of talking about some of the things that happened in that game. But I know that Coach Whittingham has tremendous respect for Coach Prime, and it seems like that's reciprocated by Coach Prime and how he views Coach Whittingham.
Oh, it's 100% mutual, and I think it's been one of the coolest things about Coach Prime coming into the Big 12 and just getting to Colorado is all the respect he has for all of the elder statesmen in the conference. I mean, he literally said this week, and he said this multiple times now since he got here, like he would love to have a tenure at Colorado like Coach Whittingham has had at Utah. Like I think he views Coach Whittingham as maybe the best in the Big 12, and as he's talked about him and obviously Mike Gundy's been fired by Oklahoma State, but those guys are kind of like we're the elder statesmen of the Big 12 and the guys that have been there, done that. And Coach Prime just has a ton of respect for guys that like Kyle Whittingham that have been at a place for a long time, done it the right way, won a lot of games. So the respect is definitely mutual. And it's honestly been cool to see the other coaches in the conference embrace Coach Prime as well, because he's an unconventional guy. Like he did a different route going from coaching his kids in youth to high school and then Jackson State at the HBCU route, and then at Colorado these last 3 years. So, but I think, like you said, there's a lot, if Kyle Whittingham has respect for Coach Prime, like I think that speaks about, speaks volumes for what how the rest of the coaches probably do and feel about Coach Prime, because he's definitely a guy that's stolen some headlines, since coming into the conference. But I think they enjoy having Colorado as a apt or a worthy foe in the conference, because he's done well to quickly retool and reboot this thing after how bad it was, before his tenure.
Yeah, and it was really bad. I remember going to games there, in years past, and it was like
that 2022 game at the end of that season was really rough. I remember being in the press box for that one and being like, I was counting if Utah would have more points or Colorado would have more yards. Like that was what I was doing at the end of that season.
Yeah, and then to be there last year and see just what he's done with with the fan base and creating excitement and seeing the stadium packed. Like it was really incredible to see that for myself, again, knowing the what it was like in years before where it was empty and there weren't a lot of people in the stands. So to see that, obviously he's doing a lot of good things there, not just for the football, but for the community there in Boulder. And I think that's been really, really impressive. So let's switch gears. Let's talk more matchups now. And Tyler, I'd be curious to get your thoughts. What do you feel is the most important matchup for Colorado this week against Utah?
I think it's just containing the quarterback run, because whether it is Dampier or whether it is Bird Ficklin at quarterback, I don't think the Utah offensive identity is going to change all that much. I think it's going to be a run first attack, and they've got talented guys at running back too. But the thing that has plagued them all year has been stopping the quarterback run. They did well against Iowa State, and Rocco Becht, who's a guy who likes to throw but can use his legs a little bit too. They contained him pretty well. But when you look at those games against like BYU or Georgia Tech, games that they lost late, giving up the big runs to Bear Bachmeier and Haynes King for Georgia Tech, like that was the Achilles heel for this team. And even that one blowout loss they had at Houston, Connor Wegman was able to use his legs when he needed to pick up yards on third down and that kind of stuff. So I think the Buffs are going to be a little bit healthier this week. That defensive tackle group has really been limited by injuries, but it looks like they're going to be back, have the majority of their guys back for this game after the bye week. Looks like the defensive end group is getting a little bit healthier too. It's all going to be about how they contain quarterbacks on scrambles and all that kind of stuff, because that if Dampier is good to go, that's been his bread and butter. I remember watching him at New Mexico last year when they played at Colorado State. I was actually at that game. They cover the Rams a little bit too. And it was just so impressive to see how Dampier gets out of trouble and finds a way to pick up yards when he needs to. Now, that's a little bit different this year when he's got two NFL tackles blocking for him, as opposed to what New Mexico had on the offensive line last year. But I think it's going to be all about trying to keep, if it is Dampier, keeping him in the pocket and making him become a passer. Even though he did have a really good game throwing the football against BYU, arguably his best of the season. Whether it is him or Ficklin, I think it's all about keeping that quarterback in the pocket and not letting him escape and get downfield for big yards.
So containing the QB run game is kind of the big key. Where do you feel like Colorado has a pretty favorable matchup coming into this one?
That's a good question. I think it's with their QB run, to be honest. Like I think Utah has struggled a little bit containing dual threat quarterbacks. I think Bear Bachmeier was effective at times last week for BYU, and Salter has become a little bit more decisive with his decisions to run. Like they've been doing some more. Just generic read option stuff where the reads are really simple for him. And he's made the right reads a lot the last couple of weeks. He hasn't taken off and scrambled too much, but when he has, he's been able to get first downs and stuff like that. And I just think the 2 weeks ago, the previous game against Iowa State was just a big confidence boost for him because he just needed to have a game like that after TCU the week prior. He had 3 pretty rough interceptions and really cost his team that game, to be honest. Like I said, that was one of those games where they were leading by 14 points late in the second quarter. And, 2 minutes later, before he can blink, it's tied going into halftime. So, he really needed a performance like that against Iowa State, and I think it'll be good for him to get out in a good rhythm. They've actually done a good job with Pat Shurmur and having good first quarter scripts. That's one of the things they've done well throughout the season. So if they're able to do that and get on a roll, I think that'll do wonders for Caden Salter's confidence in a tough environment this Saturday night at Rice Eccles, because I think that place will be jumping.
Yeah, I think it'll be another raucous environment for Utah, and so that will certainly be an important element for this team as they look to bounce back from a tough loss last week and getting back in the win column this week against Colorado. Tyler, I'd be curious if you could pick 3 X factors for this game, whether it be individual players or certain dynamics like the pass rush or things like that. What would be the 3 X factors for Colorado that would determine kind of their win-loss ability to get the win or kind of just determine the game?
I'll give you one player, one matchup between players, and then one kind of just general football thing. So I'll start off with an individual player. I think Omarion Miller for the Buffs, the wide receiver, could be an X factor in this game. I've mentioned him multiple times now as a big play guy downfield. Like you just chuck the ball up to him, and he's got such great body positioning, knows how to make defenders move a certain way without committing offensive pass interference, and able to make the play in the end zone. And I think Caden Salter has really started to trust him deep downfield for big plays, and he's easily their most dynamic playmaker out wide. I mentioned Joseph Williams too. He's a big time playmaker at wide receiver, but Omarion just has that speed size combo, and can go up and get it, like I said. So I think he's going to be a really big player to watch. And I know Utah's got cornerbacks they like, especially with Smith Snowden, guys that will probably match up against him one-on-one. So I think that'll be, he's a guy that Utah's going to have to contain in order to slow down the CU offense. A matchup between two players is going to be Jordan Seaton and John Henry Daly. Like, I think that's going to be maybe a matchup that decides the game. Like, I think the Buffs have to win that matchup to win the game. I don't think Utah needs to win it to win the game. But if they do, it's certainly going to swing their way. Obviously, with John Henry, like he's been so effective at getting to the quarterback this year, and he's probably going to be matched up a good bit against Jordan Seaton on that left side, who, as you mentioned, is a future NFL tackle. He's going to be talked about like Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano have been this year for Utah. That's how people are going to talk about him next year when he's draft eligible. So I think that's going to be a fascinating matchup to watch between those two guys who are arguably at the top of their games in the Big 12 at left tackle and edge rusher. So that'll be really fascinating to watch. And then I think third down will be a big factor in this game for both sides, because that was one thing Colorado has struggled with throughout the year, is converting on third down, especially when they get to third and short, which they've done better at this year with a more established ground game. They've just have not been in the passing game, have not been efficient enough until this past game against Iowa State, when I think they started off like 5-9 on third down or something like that. They were really doing a good job staying ahead of the sticks and picking up the yards when they needed to, with some easy stuff for Caden Salter in the passing game, and then on the ground as well if it was stuff they felt like they could pick up on the ground. So and then for Utah as well, I think that'll be key as well, and just kind of keeping the Colorado defense on the field and keeping the Colorado offense off the field on third downs and extending drives with Dampier's legs or Ficklen's legs, whoever is at quarterback, because obviously that was such a huge on fourth down was so huge for Utah last week in getting the offense not being able to convert on key plays. So I think third down for both squads will be really important this week too.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think that matchup, John Henry Daly, Jordan Seaton, I think that's going to be a pivotal one. And I think if Daly can get pressure, that would be really significant, because Seaton has only allowed one pressure all season long. So he's been really, really fantastic. And, I think on the other side of that matchup is Logan Fano. And how do you feel like the offensive line overall has performed beyond, what Jordan Seaton, the improvements he's made? How do you feel about the offensive line this season?
I mean, 4 of the 5 spots have been really settled all season and had good production. And that one spot is probably right tackle, though, that has had some inconsistent play. Tennessee transfer Larry Johnson III got the start to the season, but he struggled in that Houston game in particular. Maryland transfer Andre Roy came in for a bit in that game, and he's played a little bit throughout the season. But it seems like Larry Johnson has re-solidified that spot at right tackle. So it'll be a big test for him, like you said. Like, It doesn't get any easier, even if he's not going against John Henry Daly. Like, Utah's got multiple guys that they can throw at him as well. So that'll be a big key as well if Utah's looking to get pressure. I think attacking that right tackle spot will probably be the key, because, like you said, Seaton's been awesome, and then the 2 guards in the center position have been really, really effective as well with some veteran older guys. So I think that right tackle spot is going to be, whoever's matched up against Larry Johnson, that'll be another key spot to watch.
Tyler, how would you assess the secondary? Obviously, when you lose a player like Travis Hunter, and just what he was able to do in the secondary last year was truly impressive, and he's an incredible player for many reasons. But what he was able to do in that secondary, how do you feel like the secondary has been able to perform this year, especially given the fact, obviously, Coach Prime being a cornerback and being a great, all-time great, arguably the GOAT cornerback.
Yeah.
How do you feel like this group has picked up where Travis Hunter left off last year?
It's been pretty up and down, to be honest. Like, I think I've been disappointed by some of the play of the guys that you expected coming the year that were going to be studs for this team. Like, DJ McKinney was supposed to be the next guy. Like, he had a great year last year alongside Travis Hunter, but now that Travis Hunter's not there, he's getting attacked a little bit more. And he's got 1 interception on the year, but he struggled at times with downfield coverage. And some of that has been some of the scheme stuff too. With a lot of it's coming down on longer plays where the defensive line is just not getting any pressure and they're having to cover deep downfield for 10 plus seconds. So DJ McKinney and Preston Hodge, the two veteran cornerbacks. Preston Hodge is the nickel inside slot guy. Those two guys have been beaten in coverage more than I would have expected at this point of the season. And that cornerback 2 spot on the outside has really been kind of a revolving door. They're just trying to find any kind of consistency out of those guys. So it has been a pretty not steep, but it's been a step back for that group at cornerback without Travis Hunter, which is to be expected. But I thought, McKinney and Hodge in particular would be a little bit more consistent and play a little bit better so far this season. But maybe they're starting to find it a little bit. I thought they played pretty well against Iowa State, both those guys. So those would be 2 guys to watch for, because I think, with what Utah's got on the outside, like they don't have a ton of weapons, but I think, at the wide receiver and tight end spot, there's a couple guys you got to watch out for. And I think both McKinney and Hodge will play big factors in how they stop that Utah passing game.
That's going to be an interesting dynamic in this game, and kind of an X factor that nobody's really talking about, right? Is we're talking so much about Utah's rushing attack against the Colorado defense and the QB run game and all that sort of stuff. But I think that'll be an interesting area of the game in this game that could, surprise us all. And I don't think it's one that you point to as kind of the big determining factor, right? Because these other parts are what these programs, right? Utah's built themselves on the ground game, and that's what Colorado needs to stop. But I'm curious to see if that's something that Utah looks to exploit this weekend. But Tyler, we'll get you out of here with this last one. Just what are your thoughts on the game, how it plays out, and you got a score prediction for this one?
I do. Yeah. I think it's going to be a tight game. Like, I agree with you. Like, I think that 2 touchdown line is a little bit steep for what Utah has done recently, especially with uncertainty at quarterback. Like, I think Utah is obviously the better team, and there is a scenario where I think they run away with this game, but I think Colorado, like we've talked about multiple times now, is better than that 3-4 record says. And the close games they've been able to play in Big 12 play should indicate that. So, I'm going to go 31-21 Utes, but I think it's going to be a close game where Utah is up 24-21 late. Colorado's trying to get off the field on like a key 3rd down, and Utah's able to bust a big run for a game-sealing touchdown late. That makes it look a little bit lot more lopsided than it was. Like, I think it'll be in the single digits for the majority of the game, and then Utah will get 1 late touchdown to come away with a 31-21 win. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and I think that's going to be something similar. I think it's going to be. I think Colorado covers that 13.5 spread, and I think this is going to be a really competitive game because, like I said earlier, I do think Colorado has played more complementary football than they have, in recent years, and that kind of lends itself to being more competitive and grinding out games. So I think this is going to be a tough one, a tough, just brawl of a game. So it should be a fun one as well. But this has been great, Tyler. I appreciate you hopping on with me. Where can people, find you? Where can they read your stuff and kind of follow along your coverage there at Colorado?
Yeah, anytime, Steve. I appreciate you having me on. Just over at denvergazette.com. Got all the sports coverage there. I'm over on Twitter and Blue Sky at King_Tyler B on both platforms. So you can find all my stuff there. Got my YouTube channel as well. I think it's the same handle. So got plenty of coverage leading up to this game and then afterwards as well.
Awesome, Tyler. Appreciate the time, man. Best of luck and good luck with everything, and appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, anytime, Steve. Thanks for having me on.